Apple has been known to make moves that push technology away from traditional ways, for better or for worse. But there's one thing that they've never budged on, and that's upgrading the Lightning port on the iPhone to USB-C. But soon even that's going to change. In today's video, we'll talk about Apple confirming the iPhone is getting USB-C, but isn't happy about it. Firstly, what did Apple say? Apple has stayed silent on rumors for a while about the company looking to upgrade the only port available on the iPhone. But just recently, Senior Vice President of Marketing Greg Joswiak came to the front and confirmed that the company would be switching to the world standard USB-C port for the next generation of iPhones. Now, some would argue that Apple hasn't officially made any such announcement, and to them, we'd like to remind how strict the protocols of Apple have been. No person from the team has ever intentionally made such a huge statement if it wasn't pre-approved. Whether you like it or not, USB-C on the iPhone is a reality that's happening very soon. Not to mention Apple's disappointment in this. According to Greg, the decision to switch to USB-C is forced rather than a choice that the company has made. He says that it is because the European Union decided to standardize the way how all phones sold in Europe are charged. This clearly means a switch to USB-C. Obviously, we'll have to comply, says Greg Joswiak. Clearly, the company isn't happy with this decision at all, and Apple is known to almost always take a different path from the competition, but this might ruin that. Plus, Greg explained in detail how Apple has always preferred to go its own way by trusting its own engineers and hardware rather than getting forced to adopt hardware by lawmakers. In fact, he gave another example where the company was forced to comply with other standards, such as hearing aids and micro USBs. Adding to that, Greg also tried to counter the EU argument by saying that charging bricks with detachable cables has almost completely solved the problem of standardization. So this new rule of using the USB-C is just a stretch, and probably something to put Apple alongside its Android competitors. Following up, how will Apple manage the new restriction? According to EU law, all phones sold in the European Union will have to use USB-C connectivity by the autumn of 2024. This lets Apple have one more iPhone cycle before they're forced to switch. But the thing is, if it is eventually supposed to happen, there's no reason to delay the migration. But knowing Apple, they may still have a trick up their sleeves. Complying with the law could technically mean that Apple would add a USB-C connector in iPhone boxes that they ship to Europe. We say this because something exactly like this has happened before as well. In some countries, Apple was forced to include power bricks with their phone when they finally decided to get rid of them officially. Similarly, in France, the company was made to include wired earpods with phones, even though they had moved on from the particular accessory. Coming up, would Apple fight this decision? We need to understand that Apple is a $2.5 trillion company that more or less decides the trends of the mobile market, even though most of its competitors are not even in the same OS. So, deciding to fight the law wouldn't be a surprise, but it's worth noting that in similar cases in the past, they've not pushed back. Instead, complied with the laws, and they'll most probably do the same this time as well, at least for the time being. They're so adamant about having things their way that they've decided that it's better for the company to pay hefty fines in various countries, such as Brazil and France, instead of just including the power bricks and wired earphones. Apple included these accessories initially, but then probably decided that they're not doing this forever, no matter what the cost. To put things into perspective, the company was recently slapped with a $19 million fine in Brazil for not including charging bricks. Let's just rewind a little to where we learned about Apple's market value. Now that we think of it, it's actually brilliant that they're willing to pay the fine instead of just including the extra hardware, which most probably would have cost them much more than this fine. Okay, maybe it's not really as hefty as we claimed earlier. At the end of the day, it's all relative, and to Apple, a $19 million fine, or even more, may just be peanuts. Finally, could a portless iPhone be a solution to this problem? Apple may as well be planning something to technically be in line with European laws while not really doing what it says. There have been rumors of a portless iPhone ever since Apple removed the headphone jack in iPhone 7 back in 2016. Along with that, they also replaced the home button with a solid-state version of the same. To let users adjust to the new change, at first, Apple included a headphone dongle for existing users of the hardware. They continued this with a few models before slowly phasing out even that, along with getting rid of the home button in any shape or form. Then, they also added MagSafe to iPhones as an alternative to wired charging. further solidifying the rumors of a portless phone. The company, at first, was doing all this in the name of innovation, moving away from tradition like they always do, and taking their sweet time in doing so. But now that they're being forced to do something they don't want to do, it's likely that they'll realize that goal much sooner than later. Now let's talk a little about Apple rejecting Spotify's app update that added audiobook support. First up, what happened? Recently, Apple and Spotify came head-to-head when Apple decided to remove the app's latest update from its App Store. This was in response to Spotify adding audiobook support as the latest feature in its iOS version of the app. The update itself seems like nothing on the surface, except that the Cupertino company says that the update didn't follow the guidelines of its App Store on how an app can operate on iOS. Apple claims that it doesn't have a problem with companies trying to implement audiobooks in their apps, but it cannot let them bypass the rules that have been set. For the longest time, it wasn't even possible to manage payments for apps that were installed via the App Store. But last year, Apple agreed to show leniency in that rule and allowed companies to use emails to direct users to payment methods outside of the App Store. Spotify has been unable to follow suit. It instead designed a 9-step process for users inside the app, which pushes them to go outside the app to directly pay Spotify for the audiobooks. The update was initially approved, but later the decision was reversed, and any future updates were also denied. Next, what has Spotify done in response? Unexpectedly, Spotify has gone all out on Apple, as many have done previously. This is probably because they know a lot of their revenue comes from iOS users, even though they have to pay Apple a certain percentage of what they make. Soon after, Apple took off the app's latest update from the store. The music app reverted its audiobook feature to better comply with Apple's guidelines. Of course, they wouldn't be happy about doing this, but they understand that they'll have to take it like good boys. As unfortunate as it may sound, there's no denying that Apple already had the guidelines up for publishing apps, and all available apps on the store agree to follow those, so this could be blamed on Spotify very easily. Although Spotify has pulled the plug on its latest feature on iOS, it doesn't make sense because Apple has never said that it's looking to ban the feature. The only problem it has is how payments are handled on the platform, and reportedly, the Cupertino company has directly told Spotify how to communicate with users regarding external payments, and this much Spotify should be able to do. Finally, this isn't the first time it has happened. Apple has faced backlash multiple times regarding how it treats companies looking to publish their apps on the App Store. Meta, formerly known as Facebook, has famously been critical of Apple many times in the past. In its true essence, Meta is an advertising company that sells data to advertisers, and Apple has almost completely blocked Meta from doing so on its mobile platforms, for which even the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg himself, was quite vocal, but Apple did not budge. In fact, even more famous than that is the feud between Epic Games and Apple. Back in 2020, when Epic Games' Fortnite was at its peak popularity, it was taken off the App Store. The reason was that the app was forcing its own payment options on users. As we mentioned earlier, Apple doesn't enjoy that. Interestingly enough, Epic sued the company for not allowing them to do so. They claim that giving away 30% of their earnings to Apple is unjustified, and that's exactly why companies should be allowed to have their own payment methods so that profits go directly to them. Soon, more and more companies joined the backlash. Remember how we talked about Apple allowing outside payments? Yeah, that was the direct result of this backlash. They also made changes to the percentage cut that they take from apps. However, Fortnite never made it back to the App Store. That's a wrap for this video. Would you buy an iPhone with USB-C? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.